that's like Norman Petty and Buddy Holly. He got a writer's credit. He didn't write shit.
Exactly. So that's
good stuff. But anyway, and then Blundell's La 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 was with Stevie Wonder.
Stevie Wonder.
right. Blundell's La 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 was Stevie Wonder. That's correct.
But the thing was, the East Side sound, when I described 62 to 67 or 8, very few of the groups in East L.A. wrote their own stuff.
Exactly.
It was all covers. The original stuff started late 60s, early 70s, especially early 70s.
Which is what I was getting to there with Whittier Boulevard.
What about
South Michigan?
Well,
Yeah,
here we go. Here's
it was a rip, yeah.
here's the rub. If you listen to the Michigan Avenue song,
Same song.
The first time I heard Whittier Boulevard was right away, 2120, South
you
Michigan.
got real music heads in the audience tonight. I can see.
But the Stones didn't write it either.
Who wrote that?
They didn't, I don't know, but
Willie
they didn't
Dixon.
write it.
It was actually,
I've been there, by the way.
it was actually written by them, but it was attributed to they had a fake name that they used amongst
Oh, is that
themselves.
what happened? Okay.
Something Nanker. I want to say Nanker. In doing my research, I'm actually making a film about this history right now. So I've been interviewing all the original artists for about 10 years, tracking everybody down. That's how I found Mr. Mark Guerrero, who's one of the greatest, self-made historians of Chicano music. And so, like, I should probably ask you more questions and talk a lot less.
Gene, was it Gene Sesma? He grew up in there, went to high school with him, and
Yeah.
he was a singer too.
Yeah, his bass player, we lived about 2 blocks away from each other, so I'd go over there and listen to his band. And then I did hear Taxman.
Oh, you did?
I thought I was hearing the Beatles.
Oh, thank you.
And I always look at Mark as being like the what's the name of the Birds, Roger McGuinn type guy. He did everything good, but Roger McGuinn, I think you were influenced by him. For the
One of
Birds.
the people, the Beatles, most of the
Beatles, yeah.
Which brings us to my next segment here, which is about your own music.
Oh.
And I think we've talked to them about La La and the East Side Sound. Mark on his own has done a tremendous amount of interesting work. I mean, you were signed at Capitol from a very young age, is that correct?
I was 21, I was with between 69 and 73, I was with 4 major labels. That's pretty.
I can only think of a couple of other artists who maybe were on that level, like Cannibal and Headers were on that level. The Girls, which is a very short-lived group. The Girls were a Chicana girl group from East L.A. who all played their own instruments and wrote their own songs, actually. Kind of recently rediscovered them. They're kind of an interesting group of sisters.
Sisters.
And they were called the Four Queens.
They change names quite often. There was the Sisters and the Girls.
All the sisters.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
There's exactly what I was about to say. There's a distinction between the Sisters and the Girls.
Right.
And by the way, the Girls went through 3 different names. They were the Four Queens, they were the Sandoval Sisters, eventually the Moon Maids, and finally they became the Girls when they signed
I remember playing with
So
them.
this is
San
exactly-
Alfonso. San Alfonso, I got a flyer, 4 Queens, Mark and the Escorts, I forget who else, but I remember seeing them. They were the only female band playing drums and guitars, and they were good.
Wow.
And the Sisters were more like the Supremes, 3 girls standing there singing.
Boo boo we do.
Yeah.
The Sisters,
G Baby G.
the Sisters were the Arvizu Sisters.
Right.
And the Arvizu Sisters were actually, their father was Mark Arvizu. He was the head boxing trainer of the Olympic
They had
Auditorium.
a gym in the back of their house, and they were my neighbors at that time.
Oh.
I went to their house in Boston, and they had a big gym back there.
Right, they trained
At Eric's house.
Did she used to kick your butt?
Yeah. Cut Mark a couple of times.
TKO.
Boom.
Well, Billy Carden is the famous reconnaissance man of the East LA scene. He went to a boxing match and he saw them between matches going up there with doing their boo-boo-we-doo music. And he went, you know what, I can turn them into the Supremes. And that's exactly what he did. He went to a group in South Central, the LAGs, who were playing at Johnny Otis's place. And this is a tremendous, tremendous backing band. Listen to this one. Johnny Eccles and Arthur Lee of a band called Love.
Oh, yeah.
On keys, Billy Preston. On guitar, how can I forget? A young man named Jimmy James, who had just left the Isley Brothers. Jimmy Hendrix. Can you imagine? This was the house band at the California Club. So Billy Cardenas gets them on the record as the backing band for the Arvizu Sisters when they're kids. And they do this great vocal.
G Baby G.
G Baby G.
But yeah,
Happy New Year, baby.
Ursi tells a story that she became a boxer. And so she would like fight and then clean up and then go sing a gig after getting kicked in somebody's ass.
Not telling
That's a tough girl. You know?
She's still
Four
tough.
sets and kick ass.
She actually just did a record with Right Cooter. Right Cooter's
That's right.
released a record with her.
Yeah, Friends for Life.
Friends for Life. Fantastic.
Early 2000s.
Good
Yeah.
person. Good
I-
person. Very good.
Yeah, so she's interesting as well because she becomes later on with the Village Callers. I don't want to go too much into them.
Plus she sang with El Chicano, the first album. She was with El Chicano.
Right. We're going to have another one of these, which I'd like to invite you all to again. And we're going to be talking about sort of the 70s and the 80s. But now that I have Mark here, I'd like to talk a little bit about his contemporary work and his work since the 70s. So.
You want to talk about 70s or what?
Well, maybe start with the Capitol stuff.
Okay, let's see. Well, first we were with Ernie, Mark and the Escorts. There was a core, Ernie on drums, Rick Rosas on bass and me on guitar.
Rick Rosas, who later played with Neil Young.
Yeah, right. Well, those three, we played all through the 60s into the 70s, and the other people changed around us, and we would change names. But we went from Mark and the Escorts, we became the Men from Sound, and we each played the whole East L.A. circuit for a few years. We were very popular, but we didn't make a record. And then we became 1984, based on the George Orwell book, 1984. We were named after them, but this was in the year 1969. We were 1984. So don't get confused with this. We recorded 2 singles for Cap Records, which was an MCA label. And then we split up, and then I did a solo single produced by Lou Adler, who produced the Mamas and the Papas, Carole King, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame producer. I was 21 years old, 2 songs that I wrote, recorded. I had the Blossoms backing me up, you know, Darlene Love, Mary Clayton, Hal Blaine on drums, the Wrecking Crew. I was only 21, it was pretty amazing. And then the next year I was at Capitol.
Lou Adler was a Boyle Heights guy.
Yeah, he grew up here in Boyle Heights.
Lou Adler grew up.
And then I went with Capitol, did a song I'm very proud of called I'm Brown, which I think still needs to get out there more. I got a new video on it, by the way. And I did 2 singles for Capitol as a solo artist, but Ernie still backed me on those. And then an album for A&M, an album and a single. By then we were calling ourselves Tango. And that kind of pissed me off. Pardon?
Great band.
Thank you. Yeah, we were, I must say this, we were like, our style was much like Jackson Browne, Eagles at the same time. We were contemporaries. And I was doing rock and country rock, writing all the songs myself. And I found out later, and Louis of Los Lobos has confirmed this, that Los Lobos had our album and they really admired it and they were inspired by it. And this was 10 years before their debut album. That's how old I am. Los Lobos are these old veteranos, you know, and I was 10 years ahead of them on a major label. And they liked the album. So it's a good album. But we did an album and a single for A&M.
Did you do anything with my brothers?
Well, that was the thing. I'll tell this quick story because it tells you a lot. See, when we were gigging around town, at that time we were called the Mud Brothers, M-U-D-D. And we loved it because it sounded very funky, very R&B, you know. The Mud Brothers, it was a funky rock and roll name. So when we went with A&M, they said, well, we don't like that name. And I said, oh, we love that name. No, change it to something with a Latin thing, like Santana, Malo, El Chicano. I said, but our style's not like that at all. Oh no, and they insisted. So then, Last Tango in Paris was out, Marlon Brando, real hit movie. And I just thought, well, how about Tango? I thought that was like a compromise, but I regret that to this day because when the album came out, on the cover it didn't have our picture, it had the word tango across it. Oh. Which if somebody was at a record store, they would think that's Argentinian tango music. Why would they think that? Why would they think that's a rock album? It ruined our whole thing.
Right.
If they had had us, 4 brown, long-haired Chicanos with the Mud Brothers, I think it would have made a lot more noise.
Well, I think there's a lot of executives who would look at it and go, let's go with the Tango, not the Chicano.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing when I was with Capitol,
Even in the 80s and later on, to this very day, I think there's still a little element of
sure.
that.
When I was in Capitol, they told my manager, Guerrero, I mean, why is a Guerrero doing country rock? Like I'm not an American.
Yeah.
You know, and they wanted like to change my name, and I said no. You know, look at Richie Valens, Freddie Fender, Vicky Carr, everybody changed their name. Even Pat Lolly Vegas from Redbone, they were told that they were Vasquez. They were told they'd have to change their name if they wanted to work on the Sunset Strip. So they changed it to Lolly in Vegas. So this thing has run deep, you know.
I wanted to introduce Mark Guerrero as well, because one of the themes that we're going to be moving into next is going to be about the East Side sound, about the sound of music which comes from East Los Angeles in the 60s. And I couldn't think of a better person to bring out to kind of bridge the gap between the Zoot Suit, the Pachuco era, and later the rock and roll, the oldies, the soul, brown-eyed soul, all of this stuff that we think of when it comes to the East Side sound. And but I wanted to bring it back a little bit in talking about, since we're trying to make that transition. One of the things that I pointed out is, the music of the Zoot Suit era. It largely starts, as African Americans. Then, of course, all kinds of other people become, fans of jazz as well, and take their own stab at it. But you actually come from lineage, musical lineage, and your father contributed very much. I mean, he should be called, we call him the father of Chicano music, as we know it. So can you share a little bit of, what he contributed, especially within that context of...
That's about the Zoot Suit Pachuco thing?
Yes.
Yeah, well, he started recording in 1939, and he sang in a lot of styles, trio style, and you name it. And he always kind of knew what was going on, and he'd follow the times, and he'd reflect the times. And so when the Pachuco thing came out, he jumped on that, and I believe he was the first Chicano artist to use Gallo and Pachuquismo in a song,
Sure.
And he started doing that with the trio Imperial on Imperial Records. The three guitars and singers. And he did La Pachuquia and Pachuco, and he used all the slang. And he did tell me, this is interesting, he said he first heard Gallo, Chicano slang, in Tucson when he was younger. I think he said that he used to go to this bakery, and the people that owned it were from El Paso. And El Paso is where Gallo originated. And so these people were talking to him, and they said, what the hell is this? So he got into it, and he used to go there and play guitars and hang out after the bakery closed, and they talked like that, and he picked it up. So that's where he picked up a lot of that slang. And he moved to L.A. and continued. So he started putting it in songs, first with the trio, and then when he started having his Cinco Lobos band, he started doing Pachuco swing and boogie woogie and blues. So, and that became very popular, especially here in Southern California and Southwest. Los Chuco Suaves, Marijuana Boogie, and there you go. But he was never a Pachuco himself.
Yeah.
He never was a Zoot Suiter himself, but he knew the lingo. And when he got older, he put on the Zoot Suit to do these songs. Yeah.
No, and that's rather interesting, because a lot of the people that we think of, even some of the people that were having to defend themselves in the group trouble, weren't necessarily didn't ever gone to Zoot Suit themselves.
That's right.
They were just part of the crowd, kind of within that. But it is very interesting. We listen to the music. Right now, what we're one of the projects we're working on in the background as well is this film that we're working on that's going to deal about the East Side sound. And it's called The Land of a Thousand Dances, and David's going to talk more about that, how we, really come to that. But, it's rather interesting that you have, your foot in, these very interesting worlds. But I think one of the big questions that, we should really define is, what is the East Side sound? What is this sound that we're referring to that gets copied the world over?
Well, I don't know if it's copied yet, but that's an interesting point here. I remember having not quite an argument, but a discussion. Tony Valdez back there, Mario Camanaco, right?
Yeah.
Mario of the group The Jaguars from the 60s. Their lead singers were Steve and Rudy Salas, who later became Diablo. Well, he was saying to me like a few years ago, what is the East Side sound? There's no such thing as East Side sound. I said, yes, there was. No, that wasn't, we got our, he was saying that, we got our influences from R&B, and all that's true. But here's my definition of the East Side sound of the 60s. And there are several people here we'll introduce later who were in these bands, including my band. I would say between the years of like 1962 and 66 was that sort of golden age of the East Side Sound. And that included the Premiers, the Blendells, Campbell and the Headhunters, Mark and the Escorts, which was my band, the Midnighters, the Ambertones, the Blue Satins, there were tons of bands, the Counts, a lot of bands, you know, and all the bands had certain things in common, you know, pretty much everybody either played a Fender Telecaster or a Stratocaster. Every band had a Farfisa organ, one of those chintzy little cheesy organs, and then later a Vox Continental, you know, when you went uptown. And you had to have a tenor sax and a baritone sax, and we all wore suits, and everybody was copying each other, kind of like, you know, I myself, I was a little younger than the Premiers and the Blendells and these groups, and the lead guitar players influenced me in the way I played, and we all had a certain style of playing lead, you know, we all shared a certain sound and a certain style of playing. So I would say that that early part of the East Side Sound, like what I call the golden age, had a sound. You listen to Farmer John by the Premiers, which was a top 20 hit in the country, and it's just like Sloss and Shuffle by the Romancers. It's the same groove, the same vibe, you know. La 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 by the Blendells. All those, they had a sound. Rudy Valona, lead guitarist of the Blendells, Andy Testo, lead guitarist of the Romancers. They had a similar style. So there was an East Side Sound, but then all the groups evolved with the times. When the late 60s came about, and Jimi Hendrix came out, and Cream, and things started getting psychedelic, and Sgt. Pepper, and all the East L.A. bands started to change and get a little bit more psychedelic, and a little more fuzz tones, and you know, we changed with the times too. And then in the late 60s was when the Latinization started happening, when Santana came out, then pretty soon Malo came out.